Hopefully you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to show you a couple of scenarios under which our tools are built. I'm going to show you multiple tools. So some of our the tools that I'm going to show you are called Dig, Tellfinder, and Evidently. And these three different tools are meant to be used together. Memex isn't one specific tool, but it's a whole suite of software that's designed to help in human trafficking investigations. And these are three different user-facing tools that help in different parts of the investigation. So what I'm going to start by showing you is a scenario where an investigator has a particular lead already, and what they would like to do is to find out everything they can about a particular lead. In this particular case, the lead is an email address, and you can see here that when I search for this email address across 3 years of holdings associated with reviews for prostitutes and ads for prostitutes, that we find a huge number of results. So 210,000 over that time period. Not all of them are an exact match for this email address, but many of them are. And when we take a look at the content associated with this particular email address, we see that there are multiple phone numbers associated with this email, multiple women being sold under the same contact information, which is usually a sign that the person is either engaged in trafficking or could be engaged in trafficking. You see that there are multiple names, multiple ages of people, and there's a series of photographs that are associated with the ads that have this email address in them. Now, it turns out that one of the first tools we built for assisting law enforcement was the ability to go and find ads and find other identifiers based on one single initial lead based on image similarity. And so what I'm going to show you here is a tool that we built to do exactly that. We've blurred the images here because generally we don't want to re-victimize people who potentially have been victimized. So we try to protect their identification. What we've done here is we've taken the same image that was involved in one of the ads from that email address, and we've searched across about 100 million images to find other images of this same person. This is another image of the same person wearing different clothing. This is another image associated with a different pose. And none of these other images were ads that contain that specific identifier, meaning that that email address was associated potentially with a series of other email addresses or phone numbers. And the only linkage between ads containing these different phone numbers or email addresses would probably be the person in the images. In other words, the person in the image is probably being sold, but the seller is smart and he's trying to hide his identity by using lots and lots of fake identities. Now, we built a series of tools to help people explore that kind of similarity, both hard identifier matches and soft identifiers like faces, backgrounds, picture similarities, so that they could build out large networks of potential trafficking organizations and coalesce all of the ads that they publish online. And so what you're looking at here is a tool that we call Tellfinder, and it's designed to help law enforcement agents explore specific identifiers to find the set of all possible identifiers that might be associated with an email address or an initial lead. So in this case, we started with one particular lead, this particular email address. That email address was strongly associated with this phone number. And then from there, we found other ads based on, again, that picture that we just saw, associated with a different email address, specifically this one here. And that turns out to be associated with yet another email address over here. And all in all, there are probably around 1,800 or 1,900 ads that are associated with this one entity. Now, all of this is good. If this lead turns out to be somebody who's actually engaged in trafficking, you now have the tools by which you can subpoena lots and lots of phone numbers and email addresses and potentially gather the evidence that you care about to conduct a prosecution. But at the end of the day, you need some kind of evidence that says this person is actually engaged in something bad. And so we built another set of tools that take data from a series of review sites. And if, for those of you who don't know, in addition to the online space being the place where people post ads selling sex, there's a whole other group of sites where people who are on the buying side, the Johns, get together and they talk about the people that they have bought online, the people that they have had sex with online, and so on. And that sounds really disgusting, and it is. And I apologize if you see some text here that's offensive, because there's a lot of it in these sites. But one of the things that's really interesting about these review sites is that they hold a whole host of evidence associated with potential trafficking. And what we've done is built a bunch of machine reading tools that read those reviews, figure out which ads they're associated with, and then extract out a series of indicators associated with trafficking. And you can see them here on the left side of my screen. I don't know if you can read them. But these indicators include when somebody talks about the fact that the prostitute that he's engaged with is juvenile, doesn't speak English well, is willing to engage in risky services, has evidence of drug use or coercion, physical abuse. And when we search for this email address, and again, we could have done this for any of the identifiers that we just found through that expansion process, what we find is that there are 577 reviews, of which 211 of them seem to involve some kind of juvenile. Now, that's pretty strong evidence that trafficking is involved. In many states, I'm not sure what it is in California, but in many states, the fact that you're selling or engaged in the selling or facilitating the selling of a juvenile for sex is a trafficking-related offense. And so that is enough in and of itself to generate probable cause for somebody to conduct an investigation. And of course, we did this without you having to read the 577 reviews associated with this email address. If I were to expand this search out to all of the identifiers associated with this particular ring, there would be thousands of reviews. And what you would find is that many of those reviews would have indicators associated with juveniles, associated with drug use, and so on. And that would provide you with the evidence that you care about, and you could read all of that stuff manually if you wanted to. But the fact is that that takes a lot of effort. It takes many hours to sift through these 577 reviews and to create a pile of evidence associated with this. What we can do here is, by clicking on this, limit this to the set of reviews that have these particular indicators, and quickly realize that this particular entity is probably engaged in trafficking. Now, this is that first use case I mentioned, where you start from some lead and then you walk through the investigative process. And these three tools, dig, Tellfinder, and evidently, are structured to help you do exactly that. But the other use case, which we're really excited about, is going backwards. And going backwards here is, what if we could generate the leads for law enforcement? What if we could generate them automatically based on what's happening in these forums, in these places where people talk about prostitution, where people are doing reviews, where people are generating ads? What if we could generate those leads automatically for law enforcement so that they get alerts when something suspicious is happening in their jurisdiction, and they can just investigate immediately without having to find leads in the first place? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to show you two ways in which we do that. One way is just to use the tool that I just showed you, but go backwards. So this tool is currently running over around 15 million ads that have been collected over the last 3 years, and around 12 million reviews. And instead of starting from an identifier, what we're doing here is starting from those indicators. So what we've done here is select two indicators, one, physical abuse, and two, coercion. Evidence of both of these things would essentially be a good case for trafficking. And from there, we find a phone number that looks like, if you read this, and again, I apologize for the offensive language and the offensive content, but unfortunately, this is what it's really like online. And you can see here that the person has signs of physical abuse, and it's likely that this might be a real lead. So what an investigator can do with an alert like this is to take this particular identifier and then reverse the process. And when we did it in this particular case, what we found was a rather large network that crossed 3 different state boundaries between Georgia, Washington, D.C., and Virginia, and literally thousands of ads with multiple women associated with this particular ring. And all of that starts with a really, really simple alerting system that tells investigators automatically as new data comes into the system that there is possibly somebody in your jurisdiction who has the following characteristics, which is probable cause enough for you to go and trace off this particular bit of identifying information so that you can find out whether or not this person is actually engaged in some kind of trafficking activity. So that's one version of starting backwards, generating a lead from the data, and then helping law enforcement know that there's a crime being committed without them having to discover after the fact that a crime has been committed, much later. Mm-hmm. So one of the other things that we've been doing that I'm very excited about is that we've also, just because we've worked with a lot of law enforcement agencies, many of them tell us that the people that ultimately get trafficked, many of them start either as runaways or as missing children. And so one of the things that we've started to do is to take the large-scale database of missing children that's been compiled by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and run all of those faces against all of the ads in various sex advertisement forums. And recently we've discovered that we can find people who've been missing for years online who are being sold for sex. I can't tell you the details of that yet because there's a case pending, but it's a really promising technology, and it's going to be able to provide alerts for law enforcement in an automated way because we already have this public reporting system for missing and exploited children, and because they're often the source for many of the people that become traffic victims in these online spaces. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of what we're trying to do and the tools that we're trying to build. I'll stop now, and I'm sure you got lots of questions, so I'll stop now, but feel free to ask me anything that you like.